is episode 133 of Off Script with Trish Close, intimate interviews with interesting people. Joining me today via Skype, David Page is in the house. He is a former executive producer and creator of Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives, also a former news producer, and recently the author of Food Americana. Hello, David Page.
How you doing, Trish?
And
Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for being here. You're joining us from where? I know it's East Coast.
I am on the Jersey Shore. I live on an island called Long Beach Island,
Fantastic.
which is a tourist paradise. It's the first sandbar north of Atlantic City and home of the finest scallops on earth.
Oh, really?
We have an active fishing port at the top of the island.
Beautiful. So I'm in Oregon, close to the Oregon coast.
Right.
Lots of good seafood. Halibut is my weakness.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Halibut?
Halibut. I know, it's like a bottom feeder.
Well, no, it's a good fish. Here, the big thing in August is we actually get tuna.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Yeah.
That's good too. How long have you lived in New Jersey?
Well, we've had a house here for 26 years, 27 years. But when my daughter went off to college about 8-9 years ago, we decided to make it our full-time residence.
I love it.
And it's lovely, especially in the winter when no one else is here and the traffic lights are flashing and the speed limit goes up. But it's okay. We'll take the tourists.
Yeah. You know, it's not a bad thing when other people around the globe find the place that you live and call home a pretty cool place to visit. I take that as a compliment.
Oh, it's wonderful. I just wish they would eat what we produce here. I go into a restaurant in the summer and I see people eating like frozen battered shrimp from Indonesia, and I just want to run over to them and say, eat local. We have scallops.
You should do it. Make a show out of that. That would be pretty.
Right.
That would be pretty funny. Okay, take me back a little bit. We're going to talk about Diners, Drive-In, and Dives. We're going to talk about your new book. Where are you from originally?
I was born in Flushing, Queens, where they now play the U.S. Open, but I actually grew up in Western Massachusetts in a sort of rural area. My parents did not want to raise us in the New York area. Mm-hmm. And then obviously I lived all over the country and in Europe, and when I came back, it was to New York.
Big family? Small family?
No, just my sister.
Okay.
Who became a Broadway musician. I have no musical skill whatsoever.
Oh, wow. What kind of stuff has she done?
She was the assistant conductor of Les Mis, and that meant she would conduct the show several times a week and play first piano.
Wow, look at her. Amazing.
Yeah, she got all the talent in the family.
I don't know about that. Jewish family, correct?
Oh, extremely.
Real
Jewish?
Mean
Orthodox. We don't keep kosher, but I identify quite strongly with all of the aspects of being a New York Jew.
Oh, I love it. I love it. What was it like growing up in rural Massachusetts, being a Jewish family? Pretty typical?
Well, it was, A, there was a fair amount of anti-Semitism. B, there was only one synagogue in our town. So it was kind of if you were Orthodox, it wasn't enough. If you were Reform, it was too much. But it was, the typical Jewish experience with the bar mitzvah. And the only thing was when one of my grandmothers moved to our town, which was Greenfield, we had to travel 45 minutes to Springfield to find a kosher butcher for her.
Yeah. So was food important then? That was my next question.
No. Food is important to you if your mother's a good cook. My mother, God love her, was a great parent, a terrific accountant, and a lousy cook. Until I was an adult, I did not realize that steak was a good thing, because when we had steak, it was done on one of those black and white speckled pans, and it was broiled. And it came out of the broiler with this kind of brown sludge oozing along the top of it. So the only, quote, good food in my life at that point was literally traditional Eastern European Jewish food that my grandparents, grandmothers would provide for holidays and such. But no, eating at home was nothing special.
Okay, that's a bummer, man. I was hoping for
Yeah.
something really good there, but it's all right.
No, I mean, look, there are things that I remember as enjoyable because I grew up in New England, and every morning, Foster's supermarket, owned by Bud Foster, who did his own radio commercials, would send a truck to Boston, which in my childhood seemed like the end of the world. In fact, it was 90 miles. But Bud would send a truck to Boston and come back with lobsters, and they would steam them for you in the supermarket. So my culinarily deprived mother could stop at the supermarket on the way home, and we could have steamed lobster, which to this day is one of my favorites. And as a New Englander, I will tell anyone who boils their lobster, you're making it soggy, steam it.
Steam it. Yes,
Steam
sir.
it.
Okay, that's going to be my big takeaway from this.
That's the only one? We have more to cover.
I know, I'm just kidding. And we're done. That's a wrap. All done.
And thanks for stopping by. It's been great.
How did you get on the news path? Was this something that you always wanted to do?
It's interesting. I always wanted to be in broadcasting. When I was young, there was a prep school in our area, Mount Herman, which later became Northfield Mount Herman when they integrated boys and girls schools. And it had an on-campus radio station. And my father never knew this, but he was involved with the Jewish community on campus there, so I'd been to the school with him a few times. I asked him if I could go to Mount Herman, if I could get in. But he didn't realize that the reason I wanted to go there was because they had a radio station. It had piqued my interest. Then, when I was like 15, I couldn't drive yet. I got a job at a local radio station, WCAT in Orange, Massachusetts, the kitty cat with the 1,000-watt meow. And from there, then came Watergate, and we all wanted to be Woodward and Bernstein, and suddenly I found myself wanting to be a news guy, which I was able to do when I was going to Oklahoma University in Norman. I was lucky enough to get a job at one of the dominant radio stations in Oklahoma at the time. And it kind of went from there. I mean, I got to Kansas and switched over into television and on. So it kind of happened because I wanted to play records and be a disc jockey like Dan Ingram of WABC.
Right.
But
you
got to start somewhere.
So was there a point, though, doing radio where it was less about music and more about news, or was it always?
Yeah, once I got in Oklahoma City, the job I got was as the fill-in news guy that they would hire from the local college. And I remember asking Miss America, Tawny Godin, at a press conference if she had ever smoked marijuana, and she said yes. And it made this big national, it was on like Johnny Carson or something. And that's when I realized this news thing is kind of cool.
Nice. Asking those tough questions.
Oh, yeah. Well, look, when you're 19 or 20, you think you're asking stuff, but
Sure. I had a professor in college from Dallas. His start was in radio, news. And he said that's the foundation, really, of any good news stories because it's all about sound and less about pictures.
He's right.
So, yeah, I mean, and you could argue that now that pictures do play an important role. But he said the building blocks of a good news story, a good news TV story, was your sound and including your interviews.
Yeah, but also remember one other thing. People don't realize this. Continuity and clarity of sound is in some ways the most essential part of a produced piece of television, because I hate it. I'm watching a news story, and every time they change the picture, the natural sound with it changes, even though supposedly you're at the same place. When I was doing Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives, we spent 23 hours of sound post-production on every half-hour episode, because what I used to tell my producers was sound will cheat picture. Picture won't cheat sound.
Oh, man, that's good stuff. I just had this conversation with a reporter last night because she was in this room. There was a buzz, And every time it went to her voice, her track, right? We're totally geeking out right now. The buzz
That's
in the
okay.
room would die down, would go away. And it was so jarring. And I'm like, it feels so unnatural. It feels gross. Like, we got to fix
Well,
that.
when you are presenting, look, when you make a TV story, if you're good and honest, the presence of the TV camera and the choice of shots you take distorts the reality. It's then your job to recreate that reality as close to what was there as you technically can. And sound's a very, very important part of that.
Yeah, no, I
And
completely
for
agree.
everyone in our audience now who knows what a decibel is, we're doing well.
Right, exactly. So you get on this path of news, and then it creeps over into TV news. Where does that lead you from there?
Well, the first place it led me as a very young um, careerist was into the specialty of investigative reporting
Mm,
because I discerned pretty quickly, A, it interested me, but B, it was the way to get noticed
mm.
if you did the special stuff. I mean, it's interesting. The morning anchor at a station in Dallas just interviewed me. We worked together in Phoenix on TV 40 years ago. And to this day, I remember the fact that he dubbed me the accountant because I only filed quarterly reports.
Mm.
So yeah, I got into the investigative side of it, and increasingly, because it's those pieces that can get resources and airtime, those are the ones you're able to produce
Right.
significantly. And over time, it occurred to me I was much better at producing than I was about being on television.
Mm-hmm.
As a news director at a competing station in Atlanta once told me, where I was an investigative reporter, I was thinking about crossing the street and I was meeting with him, and he looked at me and he said, David, there are people God meant to be on television and people that he didn't mean to be on television. And unfortunately, in your case, he didn't. Um, but he was right. I have one piece of tape that I look at every few years of me on the air in Phoenix at the age of, I don't know, 24. And he was definitely right. But I also enjoyed the journalism and the
Mm-hmm.
building of the pieces. And it all came together when I was fired at the local station in Atlanta because I didn't like my boss and he didn't like me. And he had the power to do something about liking me more than I had the power to do something about not liking him. And he canned me one day, and looking, randomly for work, I figured, what the hell? I walked down the street and stopped in at the NBC News Bureau in Atlanta
Mm.
without realizing that I did that like 24 hours after one of their producers went on sabbatical to write a book. So as I'm walking out, having dropped off a tape, they're running after me going, no, no, the bureau chief wants to talk to you. I'm in jeans and I got a beard. But I was picked up to freelance as a producer in Atlanta,
Mm-hmm.
which eventually, after another stop in television, local television, resulted in me being picked up to be a producer in the Chicago bureau. And from there, they sent me overseas.
Oh, where? Overseas.
I was initially sent to London,
Mm-hmm.
which I didn't particularly love for a number of reasons. One of which is it's kind of hard to be accepted by Brits as a friend or human being. But more to the point, London was a big bureau. We had, I don't know, 6 or 7 traveling producers, and when the good stories came in, who's next? And they all occurred a plane stop away, either in Western Europe or Africa or the Middle East, which all of us who were in Europe covered. Um, so I lobbied to get myself transferred to Frankfurt, where a good friend of mine was the bureau chief and where the bureau was much smaller
Mm.
and where we were closer to the news. And that turned out to be a great turn of events until it became clear that communism was about to fall apart. And I was asked to open a bureau in Budapest, which was the westernmost and thus most accessible of the countries on that side of the metaphorical Iron Curtain.
Right.
So I moved to Budapest, and from there, as what we expected started to happen, the revolution in
Mm-hmm.
Romania being the most extreme example, I pretty much led NBC's coverage of most of these stories and ended up at the Berlin Wall the night it opened,
I know.
which
I read
was
that. That's
it was a
crazy.
remarkable experience. It was great. It was wonderful. See, I had been working a lot in East Berlin over the years, and I always described East Berlin as the same as West Berlin, only the movie turned to black and white.
Mm.
When you moved through Checkpoint Charlie, it was like in the movies. I mean, they were under your car with a mirror, and they were
Yeah.
opening the trunk. And then you'd cross over to the other side, and it was as if you'd gone back many, many years in time.
Mm.
And when I got to walk through Checkpoint Charlie with no border guards stopping me, the night the wall opened, it was unbelievable. It was just incredible. And we did a lot of work on that night and in following weeks and months, watching this remarkable thing unfold. Now, the downside, and I would never wish Berliners to be locked behind a wall, but in the news business, the downside to opening the wall was that it revealed an ugly reality,
Yeah.
which nobody thought of at the time it happened, which was America's news coverage is entirely American based. And we had been covering Europe as an American story that basically boiled down to, will a nuclear war start here? Once communism had its day and the wall opened and we were no longer massed in the Fulda Gap in Germany to be overrun by Soviet troops, but slow them down, which is really what troops there would have done. News executives looked up at each other and said, well, this is boring. So all of these great plans to put in extensive new bureaus in
Right.
Berlin, it all got dialed back.
Yeah.
And it's a shame we don't have more national interest in things that happen elsewhere.
Yeah.
Nuclear war in there. So was much of the journalism.
I do find it incredible, journalists specifically, we, not me, but others out there get to experience these moments in history and in time. And not only do we capture it, but we're the connection for the viewers. So
Hmm.
we're experiencing it along with everyone else, but we're really this, I don't know, I mean, a conduit of, all of this information, taking it in and then pushing it back out for others to see.
And it can be extremely difficult because let's face it, when you're working internationally, you are often parachuting into places you have never been before,
Right.
about which you know very little.
Mm-hmm.
And it's incumbent upon you to learn, to ask, to figure it out. I remember one of, one of my first trips to the Mideast, I was in Cairo. Something was going down in Cairo. I don't know what it was. I'd been overseas about 10 seconds. And it was a big enough deal that a vice president from New York had flown in to run the whole thing.
Hmm.
And I'm in the bureau, and he walks past me. He points at me. He says, Paige. I see. He says, go to the Sudan. No, I'm sorry. He says, go to Khartoum. I say, absolutely, Joe. And then I turn to one of the locals and I say, where's Khartoum? He says, it's in the Sudan. I say, where's the Sudan? He says, it's the next country south. And off I went. So there was a tremendous need to learn and learn quickly,
Yeah.
much of which was done, frankly, by interrogating the hell out of experienced print reporters who lived in those places.
I know.
Some of it was done by talking to Western diplomats wherever. I remember we were in Libya for something involving Gaddafi, and obviously you can't drink in Libya. So I went over to. We did not have an embassy there. We had no diplomatic relations with Libya. So I guess it was. I want to say the Swiss ambassador, might have been Belgian, who represented American interests there. And I went over to see him to get a background briefing. And everything was bugged in Tripoli. You knew that, including his house. So when you sat down, what he says to you is, would you like some tea? And I say, of course. He says, do you want tea from Ceylon or tea from Scotland? And you say tea from Scotland, and he pours you a big glass of scotch.
Oh, yeah. Nice.
Way to go. Yes, thank you, Mr. Ambassador.
Yes, that's awesome. You know, the thing about journalism, though, is if you don't know, ask, right? If you don't.
Wow, but see, that's the key. People are
Afraid to ask.
They're afraid to look stupid.
What?
I'm
not.
Just ask. I have no idea what this is or what it means. I learned that the hard way. I was working at a TV station in Wichita, Kansas, and I came back from a city council meeting and I wrote up some story about how they voted on Section 8 housing. And my news director, who knew I didn't have a clue, walked over to me and said, what's Section 8 housing? I said, I actually don't know. He said, well, I guess your viewers don't either then, do they?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, you got to ask.
Yeah.
In fact, I teach or taught, I don't do it anymore. But when you're a producer and you're interviewing someone, as you well know, your questions are not going to be on camera.
Right.
It's different when the reporter does the interview. But if you're a producer, what you're trying to do is elicit complete answers. And I just cringe when I hear a producer say, could you say it this way? No, don't do that. What I would do when I asked a question was sound the stupidest I could possibly sound and ramble on in incomplete sentences like how's that work? And they would take pity on me and give me great answers.
Right.
So, no, I'm not afraid to look stupid. I do it naturally all the time.
Same here. But yeah, I think that's just it. And it's okay. I had an interview once, you know, I asked him a question, he answered, and then I moved on. And he said, do you even know what that is? Do you even know what,
No,
do you even know what that is?
I don't have a clue.
And I said, you know what? You're right. Will you please explain that to me? And I got a fantastic interview after it. But yeah, if you don't know, ask. It's okay.
Well, you know, there's a phrase that's being bandied about on television and in the newspapers repeatedly these days that requires a half-sentence explanation. Critical race theory. Nobody explains it. They just say it.
Right.
And more than half of the audience has no idea what you're talking about.
I had to look it up. I didn't know. When the first story we aired about it, I was like, what is critical race theory? I have no idea what that means.
Right.
Yeah. Amen. All right, good stuff. I feel like we could talk about news a lot, but I really want to get into food because that's my second love right after news.
Well, we can talk about that a lot too.
Okay. You're overseas. You come back eventually. We let you back in.
Yes.
Okay. That's good to know.
I was allowed.
You were allowed. And then you start working for NBC? Did that come first?
I continued working for NBC, only now I was becoming a show producer.
Gotcha.
They brought me back to be the senior producer of a female-oriented daily talk show for which I was in many ways unqualified. I didn't have kids. I wasn't female. But in typical, you know, times may or may not have changed. Much of the infrastructure of that show was people who had no experience with the topics. But anyway, I was senior producer of a show called A Closer Look with Faith Daniels. And from that, a partner and I pitched the brass on doing a weekend edition of the Today Show. And they gave us that. We put that on the air. I did that for a while. Astonishingly, I had my differences with some of the people. There's a theme here. Some of the people in management, I left, freelanced for a while, didn't make any money. It was before the internet, so looking stuff up was virtually impossible. Got a job at ABC, had to drop down in prestige, back down to producer. For Brian Ross, who was the chief investigative correspondent. And from there, I became the senior investigative producer for 2020. And then I was actually, this has never happened to me before or since, I was internally recruited by Good Morning America to jump ship and go be a senior producer on that show, which I did. it was a terrific position. It was called line producer. There were three of us, and every third week, the show, subject to the executive producer's sign off, was yours. The downside was, since you did the control room as well as the editorial prep,
Hmm.
I would average in the week I did the show about 12 hours sleep total.
Ugh.
And that got old. And
Sure.
then I also started to have some concerns about the direction in which news was going. Full stop. No, the major news outlets do not engage in fake news. That's complete BS. But I was distressed by the degree to which certain entertainment elements were becoming more important. And the day I was told that there had been the first winner on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, and I was going to have that person in my first half hour the next morning, that's when I knew it was probably time to get ready
Yikes.
to leave.
Hey,
So,
at least you saw it. At least you realized it. I mean, there's a lot of people who don't, I think. I'm curious, is there a lot of competition within one network between shows?
yes,
Okay.
it was poaching me
Mm-hmm.
from 2020 to GMA was a cause of great internal
Hmm.
consternation. It's not supposed to be done. I mean, if I were a producer, that's fine, but I was a senior guy. And the producer of 2020 was not particularly thrilled by that turn
Sure.
of events.
Sure.
But you know what? They replaced me and nothing changed.
Right? I say that all the time. We will move on. We will survive. We will survive.
Yeah.
I do find that interesting. You said that there was a segment on a morning show that shall remain nameless. It was a segment about climate change and a book that was written. It was a fascinating segment. They gave it maybe 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes. An actor, movie actor, was on right after that, which was spent like 6 minutes on this interview, talking about their grilled cheese sandwich that they love to eat. I'm just like, are you kidding me right now? It's
Well,
obvious.
understand that those shows have become the money generators
Right.
for the networks. So the days of putting a show on the air without regard to the ratings, I mean, that was the 70s at best, or the 60s. It started to change in the 70s. So on the one hand, I understand it. You've got a program for eyeballs.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I remember when I was doing GMA, a couple of as whoops.
There
Did
we
you
go.
lose me?
Oh,
Okay.
we lost you for just like five
Okay, I'm
seconds.
back. So let
Okay.
me, I'll give you a clean in. I remember when I was doing GMA, a ball player that Charlie Gibson was a big fan of was announced. It was announced that he was elected to the Hall of Fame. So Charlie and I got all excited and booked a segment in the 7:30 half hour the next morning with this ball player and the other guy who was also elected, who we insisted come with him. And we ran it, and the EP let us, not because I wanted to, but because Charlie wanted to. And she gleefully announced to me the next morning that it was the lowest rated 7:30 half hour we'd had all year. That stuff matters, you know.
Yeah.
The other problem is, I especially had this on GMA, a lot of decision making in television, as you well know, is built around things like pace
Mm-hmm.
and the number of interviews that you can get into a half hour. When I was at GMA, the executive producer, obviously operating on advice from consultants, was jamming the first half hour with interview after interview to get as many as possible. But neither talent wanted to do less than 6 minutes on anybody. So I spent the first half hour of every show in every talent's ear going rap, 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 to the point at which Diane Sawyer, who was a lovely individual, finally looked up during the break and said to me quietly in my ear, David, one would be enough.
Oh
You know,
man. I get that. I get rap, rap, rap quite a bit. Did you get burned out? Is that what I'm feeling?
yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I got burned out. The hours were long.
Mm-hmm.
The which is one of the, by the way, that's one of the reasons I left Europe. There comes a point, I used to get up every morning, and this is healthy, and look in the mirror and say to myself, CBS is going to screw me today. I existed in fear of losing.
Yeah.
Toward the end of my time overseas, I felt that burn, that urgency, that need to get up and get on with it every day and win. I felt it starting to become a burden. Pardon me as I let my dog out. There you go,
That's
Buffy.
okay.
And you shouldn't do something that you're not 110% out. That's one of the reasons that I was open to coming back to the States. By the end of my time at GMA, yeah, I was fried.
Hmm.
I was completely fried.
Hmm.
You can't live sleep deprived for that long.
So did you have a plan? What was going to be next for
No.
you? No plan.
Well, I thought I had a plan.
Hmm.
I went to the grown-ups there and said, I don't want to do GMA anymore. And they said, okay, you're fired. And I said, no, I have a contract and, I'll work it out. And they found a make-work job for me. And then I went looking for work and got headhunted by a home shopping channel in Minnesota and was seduced by the idea of being a senior vice president at a publicly traded corporation. Got out there and realized this was the worst decision I had ever made in my life.
Uh,
Lasted about, I don't know, 2 years. And then took a risk and opened a production company and starved for a while. Um, and luckily, it was with that production company that I eventually got Diners, but it was a little rocky for a while.
right. Right. So you have this production company. I guess what I'm trying to get at was when did you realize I really want to do something food related? I wanted
Oh,
have a
that's
show
complete
that's
accident. No, I was trying not to starve. Um, Al Roker had worked for me on the Weekend Today show
hmm
before he was on the show. He also, in parallel with his NBC career, had opened a production company that
right.
was doing well. I called him up one day and said, I can't sell anything. You got any work? And he said, yeah, I'm doing stuff for the Food Network. You want to do something? I said, sure. So first I started doing segments for a show he had called Roker on the Road, producing them. And then he started subcontracting hours to me, including an hour on the history of diners. Now, I wasn't going to make a major living or establish a production company um, being the contractor for subleased product. So, quite amicably, with great thanks to Al for having given me the work,
Hmm.
I tried to connect with the Food Network on my own. And the executive who I would call, who I had met while working there for Al, was nice, lovely, took my calls and said no, and then said no, and then said no. This went on and on and on. I kept pitching. One day I'm on the phone pitching her. It's like a late in the afternoon on a Thursday or a Friday. And in frustration, she says, don't you have anything else on diners? And I said, oh, yeah, I'm developing this show called Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives. I mumbled a little bit about it. And she said, that sounds interesting. We have a development meeting on Tuesday. Could you get me a write-up on Monday? And I said, great. And I hung up the phone. And this was good because she wanted to see something from me. It was bad because I had just invented the title on the spot. I had nothing in development called Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives.
I was gonna ask.
And I spent the weekend calling around the country, talking to people. Because back then you used your phone to talk to people. It was incredible. It was a communication device. And I wrote up a show pitch for a 1 hour special and delivered it on Monday. And shortly thereafter, they picked up the special,
Boom.
which eventually, through other bizarre circumstances, turned into the series.
That's fantastic. And I know you have an impressive resume, but I guess I'm just baffled by this idea that you're calling up the Food Network and just like, hey, I
Hmm.
got this show. And she's
Hmm.
like, no. And then you call them back and you call them back. And they're like, oh, it's David again. It's David again with this
Hmm.
idea. Um,
Well, the little secret that is hard to remember when you're pitching
mhm,
is that they need good shows.
right?
Now, because most production at networks is not done in-house, what they do all day is take pitches. hoping desperately that one of them is worth a damn.
Right.
So when you're on this side of the desk calling, it seems like they have no interest in anything. But on their side of the desk, what they're saying is, please bring me something good.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Now, understand, I have had one hit show, and I have pitched, and I've done a few other shows. I must have pitched 500 shows over the years. I mean, you've got to just keep going.
Yeah. Yeah. I say that to myself a lot when I'm asking people to talk to me. They're like, no.
Well, but if you don't ask, you can't get hurt by asking.
Amen.
Doing the chapter on bagels and lox in my book, I thought to myself, you know who I'd like to hear from? I'd like to hear what Mel Brooks has to say about bagels and lox. So I wrote his office, and they called me back and said, yeah, Mel would like to do it. So I interviewed Mel Brooks about bagels and lox. I mean, you can't be afraid to ask.
You don't know unless you ask.
Yeah,
Amen.
people say yes.
Yeah, I know. Hey, you said yes.
I'm delighted to be on your show.
Yay, that's what I like to hear. So you said you had one hit show. Is that Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives?
Yes.
I mean, I think hit is a little bit of an understatement.
I will immodestly say that show has earned a significant place in the history of television.
Yes, 1,000%. It highlighted those little spots in our community that only we love, right? These little spots that people come to town. If you're a true foodie, you ask a local where you go eat.
Yeah, and the shame of it is you shouldn't have to be a foodie to intrinsically aim toward those sorts of places.
True.
Side trip here. The pandemic has kicked independent restaurants in the butt.
Mm-hmm.
So, and many of them have gone out of business. I implore people, when you're on your way to Applebee's, take a left turn and go to a locally owned mom and pop.
Please.
I was very pleased that we were able to give a forum, if you will, to individual restaurants, some of which told us after the fact that they were on the verge of bankruptcy when we called. So there was one place in Lexington, Kentucky, a barbecue joint. My daughter, through her high school years, was a competitive equestrian, so we would go to Lexington, Kentucky a lot for horse shows. And it almost got embarrassing going in there because they were like a week from bankruptcy. And then we gave them this publicity and they did well, and they wouldn't let me pay. With everything they had, it actually got to the point where I couldn't go in there that much because I felt like I was stealing their food.
Right.
But yes, I was very proud that we gave a forum to mom and pop restaurants. I am not happy that the shorthand description of the food that we were talking about too often placed it as unhealthy or outrageous, when in fact it wasn't. I really, the famed food writer Michael Pollan really, really annoyed me, let's put it that way. I had an expression that had more words. When he wrote in the New York Times about our show as glorifying unhealthy food, and I wrote him back and I said, take a close look at the show. This is the kind of food we do. It's real food. Not a lot of it is what you would consider junk food. We give the complete recipe. We show every step of making the food. How do you shorthand us as some sort of crappy food porn? Mm-hmm. Mr. Pollan, who fell a long way, in my estimation, from his perch as a god of food writing, simply said, well, people know what I mean, and he never corrected. But I really disliked that take on the show. We did whole belly clams, we did meatloaf, we did paella, we did all sorts of real food.
Yeah.
And it ticked me off to see it reduced to some kind of food porn, junk food.
Yeah. Well, I hate to break it to that food critic, but that's the kind of food that people want to watch being made.
Yes. Yeah. And look, so much of it is um, television presentation.
Yeah.
You have to make the food attractive. You have to make it look tasty. You have to make it sound tasty.
Right.
That's why we spent so much time in audio post making sure you could hear the sizzles and the
Mm,
scrapes and the flips. Because the one thing you don't have on TV yet is aroma.
right. Let's work on that, please.
I'll
Um,
go down that path.
how does one produce a show of uh, diners, drive-ins, and dives? I'm assuming you have to, if you're going to pick a city, right? You want to hit a few spots in that city to make the most of your time.
You also, your favorite, hello, the dog's back. She came in.
What's the
Um,
dog's name?
she's a little one. She's Buffy.
Hi,
She's a
Buffy.
pug. Hi, Buffy.
Hi,
She's an
Buffy.
attack puggle, actually. We also have a black lab mutt named Lady. Um, did you ever read William Goldman's book on screenwriting, Adventures in the Screen Trade? It's the best thing on Hollywood ever written, and he explains the way creative decisions are made in movie making, which is everything is controlled by budget.
Mm-hmm.
If you want the biggest car crash in the world, you have to have a budget to run three Rolls Royces together. If not, you show a close up of one car coming from the left and a close up of the other car coming from the right, and then you show the wreckage. Okay. Somewhere in the middle of there, the budget determines what you're going to do. One of the most important elements of diners was we would shoot four locations at a time, and then we would checkerboard them because remember, there were three locations in each show.
Okay.
So in a perfect world, you want to get as many different locations as possible. So the best place to go is a place near a state line where you can do like a couple in Illinois and a couple in Indiana. It increases your
Mm-hmm.
ability to checkerboard. So one of the decisions that had to be made was where are we going? Okay. What are the places that offer us the most bang for the buck? Then let's look into those places and find out what the food scene is there. Talk to food writers, talk to the writer for the newspaper, talk to the writer for the local magazine, talk to the writer for the regional magazine, get their suggestions.
Okay.
Um, Viewer suggestions were not often helpful because what's your favorite restaurant growing up may not really be a good restaurant. Anyway, so we would go with professional guidance,
Mm-hmm.
and then we would talk to the candidate restaurants in great detail about what they did and how they did it and how homemade it was. I would not do, and I did the first 11 seasons. I don't know what they do now, but we would not go to a place, a pancake joint that didn't make its own pancake batter.
Yeah. Thank you.
Um, there's a place where I live that is renowned for its pancakes. I thought about including them. I called them up. They comes out of a box. That's not cooking. Okay. So we would interview them extensively. The researchers would bring me a list of candidates that they had whittled down. I would send them back for more questions. And eventually, we got so good at it that our hit rate was 95%. 5% of the time when the crew and guy arrived on scene, it was unfortunately the case that the place didn't measure up.
Gotcha.
At which time I would tell them just to politely leave. Now, the network thought I was nuts because I ate that. That was not, the budget did not have any contingency for walking out, but I thought that the credibility of the show and
Mm-hmm.
telling the truth
Mm-hmm.
were inviolate and necessary.
Yeah.
So that's what we did.
Well, good on you. You have to, right? You have to. Um,
Well, no, but see, that raises a whole question about food journalism. I insisted that every fact be true to the best of our knowledge,
mhm.
and I held the fact checking process to the same standards I used when I was in charge of investigations at 2020. That is not always the case in that world. But hey,
Good thing you had that stint in 2020.
oh, I did a lot of investigative work when I
Oh,
was
I
younger.
know. I know. Absolutely. I love that though. Yes. And I love the fact as a food person watching that show that you did have this small spot, and there was, you know, a 60-year-old man who's like, I make everything from scratch, and I'm here all the time.
And look, part of the casting process, part of the selection process for the show was what kind of character
Yeah,
is the owner or chef. There were several good restaurants that just couldn't be booked because the chef or owner
yeah, chefs are
wouldn't
weird.
do interesting TV. And it's bizarre because it's not necessarily the people you'd expect.
Yeah.
But, the one thing, if you run a mom and pop, if you make the slightest margin, which is what restaurants make, after working 18 hours a day, which is what restaurants require, it's got to be because you care.
Mm,
They call it the hospitality industry, and the
right.
people who are good at it really want to please other people.
Mm-hmm.
And that passion tends to come through on camera.
Yeah, 1000%. Any memorable moments that stick out to you? I know there's probably a ton.
I didn't go on the road after the first season, okay, but I
Mm-hmm.
was on the road in the first season and was really struck by two places. One, and I wish I remembered the woman's name, she had a small shack by the side of the highway in Texas serving goat burgers. Goat or lamb? Lamb burgers, pardon me.
Okay.
From her own lamb. I mean,
Right.
she was vertically integrated, and she was just such an incredible character. I loved her. And Louis Miller's Barbecue in Taylor, Texas, which has
Mm.
been there, I don't know, at this point, 70 or 80 years, and what at one time was a girls' basketball gymnasium. So it's 2 stories tall with,
Right.
windows on the second floor that you can hardly, I mean, if you could get up there, you couldn't see through them. They're just covered with decades of soot and smoke. At the time, Louis' son Bobby ran the place. Bobby has since passed on, and his son Wayne runs the place.
Mm.
But Bobby was just phenomenal. A, it's the best barbecue I've ever had. B, Bobby was dry and hilarious.
Mm.
Um, Guy asked him at 3 in the morning as he was starting the fire, he said, "What do you use?" And Bobby said, "Wood." And it went from there. And
Yeah.
this guy put nothing on his brisket but salt and pepper,
Mm.
put it into this old offset smoker, and just knew at various points while we're interviewing him, he would open the smoker and take this piece of meat and put it over there on a different, knew they, and say to him, "What'd you say?" He was incredible. And the food he served there was, and I presume they still serve today because Wayne has continued
I mean,
the tradition,
that's amazing.
was unbelievable.
Hmm.
And I learned something interesting. Their sausage, traditionally, I didn't know this. Central Texas sausage was made with bull meat, allegedly because it gave a better chew, but I think originally because what else are you going to do with an old bull?
Oh, man. Oh, that's interesting. Okay, let's talk about the book. When did
Please.
where did this idea pop into your head? I'm gonna write a book.
Well, I said it with just that accent too.
Whale?
Yeah. First of all, TV producers, ask your producer in the booth right
Okay.
now. TV producers all think they have a book in them because writing for TV, as you will know, isn't like writing a narrative. It's
No.
using the proper words to, as invisibly as possible, move people from an event unfolding in front of them
Mm-hmm.
to another event unfolding in front of them. You cannot, as a TV producer, sit down at the keyboard and write, "It was a dark and stormy night. Then
Right.
Oedipus killed his father." You can't do it.
Yeah.
So for years, like most producers, I kept thinking to myself, I got a book in me. Now, secondly, I have changed careers every few years. Most of it was in television, but I was an investigative guy. I was a foreign guy. I was a morning show guy. I was a talk show guy. Then now I'm a food guy. Um, so I was feeling restless and feeling like it was time to do something new. And I finally looked up and said, you know what? I'm going to write that damn book.
Yeah.
So I did.
Food Americana is the title.
Yes. Yes.
And it's, I guess, walk me through the research a little bit. I mean, the whole point of this was what?
Well, what was good was that I did a fair amount of research on the general topic before the
Right.
theme appeared to me. The theme is, the premise is that Americans have created a cuisine of our own
Hmm.
out of the cuisines of other countries and cultures. Now, it on the one hand, it seems obvious, but I don't think it is. I think if you thought about it, as I did, you would acknowledge that sushi is now an American food.
Hmm.
It's not something that would come to mind when you go out for grab and go sushi every 3 days at lunch. Um, Everything that is in our rotation, the small menu that is American basics, came from someplace else, and that which didn't, like lobster, which was indigenous, the kind of lobster we eat, to the North American continent, we still got from another culture, that of the Native Americans, who helped save the early settlers' lives by teaching them what and how to eat. In the case of lobster, it included wrapping it in seaweed and throwing it into a pit on top of the coals, which, gosh, that sounds a lot like the traditional New England clam bake, doesn't it?
Yep. Sure does.
Um, it's, and what I find fascinating is, on the one hand, these are American favorites. On the other hand,
Hmm.
foodies, especially foodies who are in it more to be cool than to enjoy their food. Those are two different kinds of foodies. The ones with their noses up in the air, who are in great danger when it rains, will often say, well, that's not authentic. Well, authentic what? It's authentic Chinese American.
Yeah.
It's authentic Mexican American. These are separate cuisines that are parts of a cuisine that we have developed that represents America. And by the way, food evolves. When you talk about authentic to what, um, one of the most popular dishes in China right now among the young and hip is scrambled eggs and tomatoes. Do you want that in your Chinese restaurant to
Yeah.
make it more authentic?
Yeah. No, that's a good point. I also love the fact that we do have this American cuisine because it comes from so many different people that have moved here, right? And we're learning from
Hmm.
them. And sure, we are taking spaghetti and meatballs, for instance, which is not an Italian. It's not Italian. It's American.
But it was pardon me for interrupting.
No, you're fine.
The story of spaghetti and meatballs is a wonderful story because what you had was dirt poor immigrants
Hmm.
coming here from southern Italy who almost never got to eat meat because they were dirt poor.
Exactly.
And when they came to America, they found out that even if you're poor, you can afford meat.
Hmm.
And that's why things like Sunday sauce, the tomato sauce filled with pork and veal and
Yes.
sometimes beef, those things are a wonderful immigrant triumph
Hmm.
story
Hmm.
of people who came here and found out that they could have the better life they were looking for. I think that's wonderful. And no, you're not going to find spaghetti and meatballs in Italy, but that's okay.
Right.
Uh,
Right.
you know, it is a food of its own. And by the way, Italian American cuisine kicks butt,
Major butt.
major
Major.
butt.
Major, major butt. Is there any food that when you think about American cuisine, what comes to your mind after writing this book?
Lobster rolls and barbecue.
Yeah. Yes.
Lobster rolls because it's a food you can only get in North America. That particular kind of lobster. Barbecue because it is so ingrained in the development of our country.
Yeah.
George Washington threw a barbecue for, I believe, the cornerstone laying of one of the major buildings in Washington, may have been the Capitol. And also because, and there's a lot of bad in with the good here, African Americans, who at this moment may be um, our treatment of them is getting a second look by a lot of Americans. They've been kind of whitewashed out of the barbecue story. The celebrity pitmasters today are almost all white. Competition barbecue is almost all white. When I was at Memphis in May, I saw a lot of white restaurant owners, and many of them had black pitmasters. But from its very beginning, barbecue developed here. Now, it developed from techniques and flavors that had been brought from West Africa. Then, as it expanded around the country, it evolved into a variety of different kinds of barbecue. And to me, it's really a primal American food.
Yeah, for sure. Anything in writing the book that surprised you in your research?
Yeah. My people, Jews in Europe, did not eat bagels and lox
What?
because there was no lox.
Right.
Lox existed only because the Transcontinental Railroad was built that allowed the shipment of salmon from the Northwest to New York. But there was no refrigeration, so the salmon had to be packed in salt, which brined it, which turned it into lox.
Yep.
Now, New York Jews had a history of eating smoked fish. This wasn't smoked, it was brined, but nonetheless, it made perfect sense if you could afford it, because it was not the cheapest available option. That was herring. But if you could slap it on a bagel with a little cream cheese, you had something nice there. It was good.
Do you cook, David Page?
Oh, yeah. But I'm an eager amateur cook, and I do a good job. But I don't have the it that you need to be a chef. I don't feel it. I mean, if I'm going to have people over for a steak, I'll probably cook an extra so I can cut into it and make sure it's ready.
Nice.
I'm not one of those chefs that I've interviewed over the years, like Bobby Miller, who out of nowhere turns around and does something to the food because he feels it.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, I love to cook. I'm pretty good, but I'm no chef.
Yeah, that's interesting that you say that. I love to cook, but yeah, I would never want to like even go that path. I just feel like it's something that I love so much now. I would hate for it to be, I would hate to be a slave to it, I guess.
Yeah, and cook. The good thing about cooking is you can do whatever you want. It's not like baking, which is chemistry. Baking, if you're a quarter teaspoon off, it all goes down the drain. Food, you get to be creative, and I like that. I make a hell of a roast chicken.
Yeah.
I make the best. I have a secret. I cook it at 500.
Do you?
I preheat the oven to 500.
Wait, hold on.
Salt, pepper, little cumin.
Hold on. You paused. Go back. Preheat the oven to 500.
Okay. I preheat the oven to 500. I put my chicken in a pot, not a pan, so I have some depth.
Okay.
Salt, pepper, garlic, surrounded by vegetables. Then I pour in a huge amount of stock so that the chicken doesn't dry out. It continues to absorb the liquid. Then I put it in a 500, and it's so hot, A, it cooks quickly, but B, you get a real nice skin. And that's nice.
I love
I
a
also
good
make
roast
the
chicken.
best. I also make the best Jewish Italian red sauce in New Jersey.
Jewish Italian red sauce.
Well, I'm a Jew and I make an Italian red sauce.
Okay,
so
help me
there you
here.
go.
What does that look like?
Oh, it's a basic. It's you put onions and garlic in the bottom of your pan with some oil. You get it going. Then you squeeze out the insides of 6 links of hot Italian sausage. Bought at the butcher, not
Please.
the supermarket.
Please.
You get them going. Then you throw in 4 or 5 pork ribs. You get them browned. Then in comes your crushed tomatoes, oregano, salt and pepper. Heat goes way down and you leave it there for a long time. Oh, don't forget the red pepper either. Now, truth be told, I learned it from a dear Italian friend who grew up in Brooklyn. But
And then what happens to the pork ribs? You take all the meat off and throw that in?
Oh, the meat just it just comes off the bone in the sauce. It's
Mm,
fantastic.
okay.
Gotta trust me on this.
I do. I do. Very much so. This is going to be my next Sunday project. I
But
love
but
it.
understand, this is a dish that requires minimal actual chefy skill.
That's my favorite kind
A
of
real
dish.
good stuff that you just put in and it stays for a while.
That is my favorite kind of dish. It's so funny when people are like, "Man, that looks so good. Is it hard?" I'm like, "No, you throw a bunch of crap in a pot and just cook it."
Oh, but the single best company dish ever
Yeah.
is beef tenderloin
Oh,
because
yeah.
salt and pepper, 500-degree oven, 40 minutes max, out it comes, and you're like some kind of chef. And what's interesting about it is it's so much better than filet mignon, which is cut from that same cut.
Yeah.
I assume that there's something about having the whole log in there that the juices get to move back and forth. But yeah, that's the easy peasy company dish.
Okay. Good stuff. Good tips, everybody. Take notes. I do want to wrap up and get to the final three, but
Okay.
where can people find Food Americana?
Well, any place you buy a book,
Hmm.
all the online sites, Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, Walmart.com, Target.com. My first choice is Amazon because they're the ones who collect the metrics that help
Ah,
you rank your book and get it promoted. But and independent bookstores as well.
yeah.
It's also for sale all over the world in various online forums.
Yay. Well, congratulations.
Thank you very much. Oh, they just announced the 2021 International Book Awards, and we didn't win, but we were named a finalist in the history category against some real serious stuff like did the war end the world? I mean, I was stunned. So yes,
That's
we were a finalist.
amazing.
It's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. Thank
Congratulations. Well, I'm super excited to read Food Americana because I'm a food nerd, and I'm super excited to dive in. Let's get to the final three, which I love the
you. Okay.
fact you said I'm gonna need 15 seconds extra for this first question, and I was like,
Wow.
oh, honey, you can just talk. Um,
Yeah. Well, once a producer, always a producer.
yeah. Okay. Wait. Before we get to the final three, I
Mm-hmm.
anchor the news at 5 and
Uh-huh.
6. I have a producer who writes the show for me, and then she's in my ear.
Mm-hmm.
What's the biggest pet peeve of yours about anchors?
Rap, damn it.
Stop talking.
Before the computer takes us away.
I know, that's so true. That's so true. That's okay. So basically, it's a chatty anchor.
Well, it's an anchor that doesn't listen.
Listen.
On the other hand, let's be fair,
uh,
too many producers spend too much time in the anchor's ear.
mm,
Let him or her do their job unless you need to say something. People out there don't realize you're wearing an IFB
yeah, I do.
in your ear,
Hmm.
and someone in the booth starts talking while for example, if you're listening to someone's answer and the producer starts talking to you, you can't hear the answer. How are you going to do a real follow up?
Thank you.
It's so, hey, guys in the booth, go easy on.
Zip it. Pipe down.
Yeah.
I will say this. When my producer says 20 and then she gives me a wrap, I'm out of there. I'm known for getting that show on time, exact, where they come back and they say, okay, good job, show's exact. And I'm like, and you're welcome.
Thank you. Remember Laura? Do you know Laura Spencer from GMA?
Yeah.
Okay, Lara, not Laura. We started using her on the show when she was still her primary job. She was a reporter at WABC in
Right.
New
Yeah.
York. And I said to her the first time we were going to have her live, I said, what kind of warning do you want? She said, simply say 15. And she was ungodly. You said
Mm,
15 and she was out in 15. I mean,
yes.
she had a clock in her head.
Yeah.
Love those.
Yeah.
Love those.
Yeah. That's talent to me for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, David Page, best advice you've
Yes.
ever been given.
Okay, here's the extra 15-second story. Romanian Revolution. We get out of our car in front of a hotel in Timișoara, Romania. Suddenly, there are bursts of AK-47 fire. I had not done a lot of bang bang at that point. George Lewis, my correspondent, had been in Vietnam. We're both instantly on the ground. I look over at George. I say, now what do we do? He
Yeah.
pulls a bottle of scotch out of his backpack and says, we do this, which I translated into, don't get too anxious about anything. Just do your job.
No, he didn't.
Yes, he did.
We do this.
We do this.
That's what someone, an old co-anchor told me. That's what they used to call getting professional.
Oh, damn straight.
Oh man, that's good. And the lesson there is, say it again.
Don't get too anxious about anything. Just do your job.
Just do your job. All right. What's your happy place?
By the pool in Puerto Vallarta with a plate of ceviche.
Oh, yes. Now we're talking. I don't
Damn
think,
straight.
Yeah, damn straight on that one. Okay, speaking of food, what do you crave these days in all things food and drink?
Okay, depends on the day. It's either bagel lox and cream cheese or caviar and blinis.
Ooh, nice. Do you do bubbles with the caviar?
Of course. Well, actually, no. I learned to eat, I will, but I learned to enjoy caviar on many trips to Moscow, so I tend to do it with shots of vodka.
Oh, okay. Of course. Of
Yeah.
course. It's just someone once told me also with caviar and champagne, the dumbest, most decadent food that you could possibly enjoy, and that was his final meal because he just said it's just so stupid
Oh, it is.
because it's just so
It is.
decadent.
Although I will tell you, we were stuck in Moscow for a long time waiting for an interview with some bigwig, I don't remember who. And it was back in the old days, and there was no variety of food. The hotel would give you this big menu, and you'd point, and they'd say, don't have it, and you'd point and say, don't have it. Then you'd say, what do you have? They say, well, it's a big menu. So we figured out pretty much the only thing you could count on was caviar and blinis. And we were there so long, I actually got sick of caviar.
Yeah, I bet. But you
Never
like
thought
it
that
now.
would happen.
Okay.
Nothing better.
Nothing better. David Page, you've been so fun. If I'm ever on the Jersey Shore, I want to go have
Please.
a lobster roll with you, and I want to hear more stories from your news days.
You are welcome anytime.
Okay, woohoo! And if you are listening to this podcast, please subscribe, rate, and review. You can watch it on YouTube. Just look up Off Script with Trish Close, and you can listen to it wherever you like to listen to your podcast. One more time, David Page, former news producer, but also author of Food Americana. Go grab it and learn all of the things about what makes the food in this country so fun.
You've been terrific, Trish. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, David.